Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Fundamental Escape podcast. I'm your host, Mark Fitzgerald, and I'm really stoked today to have John Safran, who is the author of the latest book, Depends What You Mean By Extremist, among other documentary programs which we'll maybe touch on and things like that. But welcome to the program, John.
Hey, how are you? Thank you very much for having me on. Where exactly are you at the moment?
I'm in New Zealand.
Yeah, but you can get a bit sort of more specific than that. Like, how stupid do you think I am?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm in Auckland.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, I've been there.
Yes.
I was trying to ingratiate myself with you and the listeners, but you seem highly uninterested that I've been to Auckland. And I am going. I think I'm going to one day to New Zealand this year
nice.
For a book festival.
Oh, cool.
For this book. Anyway, you go on. Sorry.
Sorry. Just to be clear, I wasn't. Most of the people that listen to my podcast are actually in America. Funny enough, so.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's this weird internet thing. I'm kind of in this circle online, and so let's just dive in. I first came across you as a person and as a media figure back in 2004 with your quaint little docu-series, John Safran Vs God. And I was, given the name of my podcast, I do come from a very Christian religious background.
Yeah.
And I was like, in that time of my life, I was very fundamental when I watched that show, and I was like, it was incredible. And I've been in the world, not heavily, just for context, but I've seen like people like exorcisms and all that sort of stuff, and I've like been in that world, and so to be, to see what you did, I was just like, I was hooked, man. I was like, this guy's incredible. Like, what the heck is he doing? Like, it was insane.
It's interesting you say that, because I guess like people might assume that because I'm always poking around religion and taking the mickey, that like religious people and devout people must have a real problem with me or something. But it's not that simple, because I think it's because, not that I kind of micromanage this or try to contrive this, but because I went to have a Jewish upbringing and I went to a very religious Jewish school, I think I kind of, just in real subtle ways and in uncorny ways and in ways where I'm not kind of trying to oversell it, or I think I talk through things through a lens. So in these sort of a million subtle ways, it comes across to devout people that I'm not some, like some atheist who's sort of like, who's part of a sort of separate culture to the devout culture, and and that's always held me in good stead with my work. Even with the new book, where I hang out with some devout Muslims, some just devout in kind of a casual Australian way, but then also with some real hardcore like ISIS supporters, and I think the same thing happened again, where they kind of get, just through all these subtle things, that like they can talk to me about religious things, and even if I'm not familiar with the small things in the scripture or whatever, I just broadly kind of am open to hearing it.
Absolutely.
Therefore my work kind of has a different conversation and kind of like comes across a bit differently to some sort of like maniacal atheist who's out to commit deicide and bring down God.
Well, I've actually never heard you refer to yourself as an atheist, quite honestly. I actually don't know where you stand, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I'm not, I'd say, I definitely want things to be true, and and I'm just way more interested in mystical things than I am in like politics or whatever. Like I really, my eyes glaze over a bit. Like at the moment, I'm trying to read up a bit about like Israel to find out more about that. And I love reading things that are kind of like the founding of Israel, that's coming through that religious lens. So as soon as I find out that, this Palestinian group formed because they all, fell around the Quran, like I find that like way more interesting. And in the Jewish equivalent, I find that like way a more interesting way that I can engage with any topic, rather than, the one where everything's like cold politics and things like that.
Man, I'm so glad we're opening the conversation here, because I feel exactly the same. And I like the quote from the late Andrew Breitbart, founder of Breitbart.com. He was famous for saying that politics is downstream from culture. And
Yeah.
it seems to me that politics is almost like the semantics of it all. It's
Yeah.
the last point. It's not the first. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like just kind of whatever you say something and it triggers something in my head. Like with the thing you just said about how downstream. What did you say?
Politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah. I absolutely felt that because I mean, just giving a real quick rundown of my book. I spent like 18 months hanging around various radical people in around the Islam versus anti-Islam scene that's developed in Australia. And because your audience are Americans, like one of the real interesting things, this has become like there's a real Aussie, this is a real Australian thing that I'm not sure, even though there's obviously debates about Islam and there's discrimination against Muslims in America and there's been terrorist attacks in America, there's this thing that's happened in Australia where it's sort of like edged way more into the sort of the mainstream. And so for instance, you'll have a protest and you can actually get like big numbers in to turn up to like a far right protest that
absolutely
like positioning itself as pretty mainstream. And the kind of the proof of what I'm just saying is that a guy from, I think it was Arizona, I forget what his name is, he called for a global anti-Islam day where he wanted people all over the world to rally against Islam. And I turned up and reported on for my book, the one that went down in this town in Victoria in Australia, this sort of, it's not in the city, it's more a regional town called Bendigo. And it was like huge and it was amazing, like over 1,000 people just from one side. And then that's not even bringing in the counter protesters.
Yeah.
And anyway, I thought it was amazing, weird. And then I found out a few days later that the rally flopped all over the world, like in America, like even in Arizona, like it was just like some piddly little thing. And Australia, in Bendigo in Australia, was the biggest success story for these anti-Islam rallies.
Yeah, no.
And sorry, joining that back to what your quote from Andrew Breitbart is, I really noticed that the strategy that a lot of the leadership, whether they're from the far left, the far right, or sometimes from the less so, would be them figuring out that culture is the way to. Like they can't quite say what they mean. Like if they just espouse their politics, it's kind of unpalatable.
Well, Hollywood very much understands this as well. You know, that's why it's very left-driven at the moment, at least, because they understand. And, you know, the whole subject of storytelling is, I know, a huge thing for you, obviously. But you understand, like, it is almost the value of... you know, there's like explicit communication and then there's like implicit. So,
do you know? Like, yeah, absolutely. I reckon like with the implicit stuff, it's so hard to almost explain, but it's so there. Like I try to like sometimes Jewish people, they might, because my stuff is like me being sarcastic and taking the mickey out of things in the Jewish community or whatever, and. You know, so they're like, "Oh, you self-hating Jew" or something like that, and not that I kind of. And I'm not pretending. Like most Jews are kind of fine because they like comedy and all that stuff. But like, I really believe that the fact that there's a culture within the Jewish community of like Jewish comedians who take the mickey out of Judaism, like in all these subtle and more explicit ways, from Larry David and stand-up comedians. That really communicates to the outside world that the Jewish community is a healthy community where you're allowed to take the mickey, and taking the mickey and being self-critical is a healthy thing that actually presents the Jewish community in a good way to the outside world.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's all this kind of like subtle stuff that's sort of hard to pin down. And when you hang out with, like I did, with ideologues from all sides, like they just don't get that, or they don't want to get it, and all of them are like, oh, unless you are marching down the street holding up a sign saying I'm against racism, or you're like delivering a press release from your community,
you have to be explicit about
ethnic
everything.
community group. Like, what's the point? Like they all think they've got these gotchas on me. Like, oh, I'm better than you. I said I'm against racism.
Yeah, well, that's the term they call virtue signaling, where everyone's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, they want to tell you how virtuous they are. But I did want to touch, so just to touch briefly on your book, and I do have to confess, I'm in early stages of reading it. Your
Yeah.
publisher was kind enough to FedEx me a copy, which was amazing. But I sort of took two passes at reading it. Like, I sort of started reading it because I was reading it going, oh, I'm going to talk to John Safran. Like, I have to read
Yeah.
it and, like, figure it out. And I sort of started reading it with this, like, analytical mind. I was like, what's his position? Where does he stand? And
Yeah.
then I couldn't engage with it on that level. And I was genuinely, to be honest with you, I was getting frustrated because I was like, maybe I should, like, reschedule this interview because I'm like, I don't think I can do this. But then I just started reading from the beginning again. And I just, like, I let myself get caught up in the narrative.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great. I was like, this is great. And you've got a, sweet quote on the back from Louis Theroux. Man, I love to talk to that guy. He's amazing as well. But yeah, just to get caught up in the story of it and just to go on the journey. And I'm going to pace myself through, and I'm absolutely going to read to the end because I think, it's you. What I love about you, John, is that you, like I say, with what you did with Versus God and all that sort of stuff, and I've seen some other clips here and there, but it's this immersive attitude towards documentary making and things like the storytelling. And I think there's this sort of myth that documentaries have to be completely objective and whatever. And it's like, I wonder what your thoughts are, because I don't even think that's possible. Like,
I don't think it's possible to be objective. But I guess what sometimes people, I reckon there's this weird thing where on some basic level, regular people get what I do more than sort of like people that have got kind of political agendas or whatever, because normal people just instinctively, for instance, think humor's healthy. And they think that, if there's like a tense thing that you're not meant to speak about, there's something healthy and funny about some smart aleck going in there and sort of saying the wrong thing. And I think most people get that I'm coming from not a malicious perspective, and they process that thing that part of John's humor is to kind of present himself as this kind of, not obnoxious, but, like just got trotting around in my muddy boots and just going in and saying something that's sort of like, oh my God, you're not meant to say that. Like, for instance, in this book, it might be me finding out about this passage in not in the Quran, but in Muslim scripture about how, in the upcoming Messianic war, the Jews will be hiding behind trees and rocks.
Oh, yeah, I've come across
but the talking trees and rocks will say, "Oh, servant of Allah, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come kill him," or whatever. But there will be one tree that won't talk because it's the tree of the Jew, right? So I just do this thing because, like, the creative side of me just thinks that's like incredible and really interesting. And I sort of like just intuitively know, like, if I actually start asking people about this, like Muslims, whether they're ISIS supporters or whether they're just the regular punters or whatever, like, that's like weird. And that's definitely something like a regular person would just not do, because they'd be like, oh my God, I can't do, like, you're not meant to talk about religion, and you're definitely not meant to talk about, hey, what's this thing, in the scripture. And I just do that. But I still think, like, things like that, they just sound way more provocative in theory. Like, it's something that you couldn't get up at a public broadcaster, because it'd be like, oh, you shouldn't, like, it might make things sound, really wrong, or but then I just do it in the book and it just comes across the right way, and, like, people just don't, like, it's not like the book's been out and, like, I've got a fatwa against me or anything like that, like, because it just,
you did actually get the fatwa removed from Rove, right?
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I've got a fatwa pass, but yes, and also I guess the other thing and this is something where I've just, like, I didn't really analyze it when I was younger. Like, you just go on instinct, but so many people ask you about it, so you start kind of massaging things in your head. And actually, in this book is like the first time I actually start talking about things like the value of comedy and the value of transgression in a literal way, and that's because I felt like, maybe it's kind of interesting to kind of defend myself, and because I don't do it in like a whiny, earnest way. It's just sort of me sort of, playing around with things or whatever. But I do think that with my work, I don't really care about, I've got to tie things up in a neat bow, or I have to know at the very start what I'm getting at by the end. I'm way more like a musician who's like jamming and sort of like picking up this emotional energy or whatever. So, for instance, me hanging out with this, I don't know what bit you're up in the book, but for instance, I hang out with this far-right group that includes like a convicted neo-Nazi who actually was convicted for stalking a rabbi in my own community or whatever.
You do.
And I'm hanging out with them after this rally, after this anti-Islam rally, and we're at this after party, and I'm smashed. And then I find out that one of the members of their anti-Islam group is married to a Muslim guy, and he's there at the party. I'm like, what the hell? And I just sort of like start floating about and asking all these questions, and I'm there with my dictaphone. Yeah. And I'm smashed and they're smashed or whatever. And I just kind of have this feeling like, oh, this is like strong. You know, like almost like the artist side of me going, not the sort of I'm doing a think piece or I'm trying to say something. I just like in a very broad way, I go, it is interesting that at this anti-Islam after party, there's a Muslim here or whatever. And so I just madly go around trying to capture everything with my dictaphone. And then later I kind of try to pull it into shape. But even then, I'm not even sure exactly, like, I'm not sure exactly what it's saying, to be honest. But I just know it's strong. and I know it means something. It has meaning. And I'm off. And with this book particularly, I've noticed me going by my instinct that, like, things are kind of interesting and I should take a note of them. And things are interesting. People have really picked up things and kind of put the pieces together and said, well, this says that. And, So in the case of the Muslim at the after party of the anti-Muslim group, a friend of mine who's like a more regular Aussie than me goes, oh, yeah, that's such an Aussie thing where, like, oh, you're okay, mate, you know, like, and that's what sort of makes us different from, you know, Europe and how a simulation is going to go down in Europe with Islam and non-Muslim people. And
there's huge issues going on.
Like it's going to be different. And but he pulled that all together. Whilst I was just like, oh, this is pretty funny and weird and crazy that I'm at the after party and this is happening. And even the things like me putting in the book that I'm drunk. Like I know, like there's just an instinct in me that's like, oh, that's wrong. You know, like that's not what you're meant to do as a journalist. And then it's wrong because like you're breaking bread with bad people. Yeah. And then,
but that's human. It's how you get the story.
But I just put it in there, not really thinking about, just thinking about it more as a creative person where I'm like, yeah, but all that wrong stuff kind of just gives it this mad energy. And I just imagine the reader reading it and kind of thinking, oh my God, should he really be drunk there with them? And is he going to get beaten up because he's Jewish? And all this sort of like unspoken stuff in the margins that's not even on the page. I kind of really feel that. And I kind of let that guide how I write stuff, like how I wrote this book. So it is way more like a mad cascading adventure than it is a think piece. And possibly I screwed it up. But possibly I should have made it more of a think piece or put more commentaries in there. But I'm really addicted to that thing of, I really like art that's like disorienting, like where you kind of
it's disruptive.
You're confused.
It's disruptive.
You're confused and you kind of don't know what's going on. Like in Versus God, that documentary you referred to, where I get exorcised and I spend 4 days with an exorcist.
Oh man,
and everyone's like waiting for like me to take down the exorcist or to endorse the or just whatever. Like, what the hell does this mean?
I just watched that clip again, Jake. Before what? I mean, I feel I want to do a whole hour with you another time on that. I've got a friend who's keen to talk to you as well, but because we were both quite fundamental and things like that. But did you? Because I never saw it. You left that documentary really open ended, like.
Yeah, and people got disturbed by that. But this is how I justified, again, in retrospect. And it's the same with this book, is that I just think that's a part of life and the world, that there's this crazy energy running through it.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, I think it's a kind of a cool thing for an artist to capture and then like put out there. So I actually think, like, for instance, with everything going down in the world with terrorism and also Islamophobia and just this, everyone being a bit unsure and on edge, I think, as well as all like the literal politics and the policy making and everything, I think like this book in its disorienting way really captures like a mood and like
it does.
Isn't that good? I think, but then again, if someone's really going to corner me, the problem is when you're in my line of work like that, like the literalist is always, and the earnest person is always going to win, especially on the like, because they can just go, yeah, but what's the point?
Well, it's what I was saying before. It's that explicit. Like they just want the explicit. They just want, and that's where I came at it wrong at the beginning because I was like, what's the answer? What's his position? What, just trying to figure it out. I mean, just to say, I know we've only got, this time's going real fast, which is fine. But, like, as I say, I grew up in this very religious world and my whole world was just God. It was heaven, hell. That was all we were. I was in that bubble. And it wasn't until sort of late 2015 that I had this sort of political awakening. And for me, it was, I connected with the guy, that guy Milo Yiannopoulos. It was just on the verge of his tour that he did in America. It was I spoke to him in like December 2015, and he was on Bill Maher's show a month or so ago and talking about humor as well, and saying, he goes, it's humor that brings us together, and it's it's so wrong-headed the way that people try to divide and like language police and all that kind of stuff, and it's weird to me, and I wonder what your thoughts are. Maybe we can sort of wind down on this sort of thing, but like just thinking like the whole social political climate now versus say 2004 when your Versus God thing was a thing and came out. It's just like especially with this guy Milo, he like there's this the alt-right and all these labels that get bandied about, but like conservative is like the new cool now, and especially in America, it's like counterculture to be conservative right now.
Well, I mean, there's so much you said there, and I kind of like don't know what particular one to bounce off, but like here's a couple of kind of just miscellaneous thoughts. Is that I feel that Jon Stewart, who's very funny, has ruined everything. Because he created some reality that this is what comedy is, which is you have a watertight position at the start, like it's like the opening of your essay for university of what you're trying to prove, and then you then give off all these sort of like little points, almost like dot points, that sort of backing up what your argument is, and you've got this watertight thing, and I think that really signaled to people who aren't like really in the creative sphere that that's what creativity is about or comedy is about. So then it becomes like these weird things where they say, well, did that comedian, bump off, or get a politician fired? Or did that, what in a kind of a very bean counter way can we say is the benefit of that creative piece? And so even I get some of this like stuff where, like for instance, I took the mickey out of this hectoring current affairs reporter in Australia at the very start of my career.
Oh, what was that guy's name? I just watched.
Yeah, Ray Martin.
Yeah, I just watched that today.
And so again, like I don't want to. Like I'm no victim. Like people like my stuff, but within that, so I don't want to like make out like
you had a paper mache head on.
Yeah, like I don't want to make out like everyone's against me or anything. But there were people who were like, yeah, but Ray Martin, he still hosted a current affair after you did that. So like, what's the point? And it's this sort of bean countering. It's like this sort of like maybe people who are conservative or something might have this bean countering thing like, everything in art has to make money, and if it doesn't, what's the point? But there's this sort of ideological bean countering, maybe on the other side, where it's like prove to me that this kind of took the scalp of a politician that I disagree with, or else what's the point? When I really think that comedy is also, it's not just about that at all, or satire is just not about that at all. Like if you look at the roots of like Jewish comedy in America, like back in the old days in the 30s and 40s and 50s, it's like it was sort of you know, kind of bouncing off against like anti-Semitism and learning what had happened in Europe to the Jews, and so therefore it was almost like a healthy scream.
Yeah.
You know, like but instead of like screaming, it's like, you know, Mel Brooks, a Jewish comedian, dressing up as Hitler, and and like that's not taking any. I don't think like Mel Brooks is good because, and I don't think he took down any Nazis or any bad politicians or anything. But it's like you just need to scream, and comedy is a healthy way to scream. I mean, it's a bit like I spoke. It's interesting that we're talking about exorcisms because after that episode, I spoke to a few non-religious people who are therapists, and they endorsed exorcisms because they said that it's basically, I'm simplifying, is screaming's healthy, and screaming out what you want to really scream out is healthy, and if that's the cultural filter by which they're comfortable to do it, that's good. And so I kind of think that comedy. Yeah. And like what I do is as much more that than it is about
healthy screaming. Yeah.
It's like you know, in Australia at the moment, there's people marching down the streets and they've got, you know, they're accusing the other side of being Nazis, and so there's these huge swastikas on signs. And even that's like weird. Like in my multicultural hometown, there's people marching around with swastikas on signs, and then you have all these complicated things where, you know, the lefties are saying, hey, watch out for the Muslims, are anti-Semitic, and then the Muslims are saying, hey, watch out for the far right.
Everyone's just running scared.
They're after us now. They're after us now, but they're going to be after you next. So all this stuff sort of like floating through the thing, and like, why wouldn't I scream at that?
Just going back,
but it's a comedy scream. So it's more like, this book's more a personal exorcism, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm so glad you brought this up. And we'll totally wrap up here. But I just watched the exorcism clip on YouTube about an hour ago, and it was really strange. It was the first time I'd seen it in years. And I had this real kind of emotional experience watching it. It was really strange. And you just articulated it perfectly when you talked about the therapy thing. Because I was like, I literally had that feeling when I watched it earlier. I was like, is this, like, there was something about it that I didn't look at it. I was so far removed from it as a religious experience. Because I watched the way that guy Bob Larson, like, because I'm in sales, right? So I know all these techniques of sales and how to, like, sell ideas to people.
Bob Larson's the exorcist.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I watched the way he did that whole process, and he was like, to me, I almost deconstructed it as like a sales process. I was like, I felt like he was just selling you on this whole idea. He was like building a story to you. He was like, this is, oh God, oh, you're walking flypaper for demons and all this kind of stuff, and like just building. But in closing, I have to get this in here before we wrap up. We were talking earlier about the whole thing of being disruptive. My friend, his name's John Botha, and you actually owe him an apology. Because you were it was a Melbourne Film Festival. Apparently it was a Roman Polanski movie. And you were sitting next to him and he said you were talking the whole way through the movie.
Oh, really? No, that's probably true, I guess. I mean, I don't specifically remember it, but you know, I'll wear that. He
was very upset and he did want an apology. So
okay, well, I'm sorry for that.
No, it's awesome. Look, this has been so amazing, and thank you so much again for your time, John. It's so much fun. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but maybe we can do this again if you're up for it. But
yeah, sure. Yes, and the book, Americans are going to be annoyed because the ebook is geo-blocked, so Americans are going crazy. Like,
oh, wow! That's like the Barbara Streisand effect. It's always gonna. You tell someone they can't have something, they're just gonna want it 10 times more.
Yeah, but Australian and New Zealanders. But if you want the hard copy of the book, like, you just order it from any old Aussie bookshop, like you know, and they'll send it to you in the mail. And also, I found out that the audio book is that's international too. And that's
cool.
Yeah. So
I nearly downloaded the audio book just to rush. I was going to stay all night just listening through it, but
Cool.
No, that's cool.
Okay.
What's you're on Twitter as well, right? Is this John Safran?
Yeah, I'm just on all the social medias.
All the social medias.
As John Safran.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much.